little warning. We are all going to die.
And there's no way of getting out of it.
But take a step back. As they say, use your time wisely.
Now, I'm not going to divulge too much into this. When it comes down to it,
The key is living in the moment.
Hopefully I don't need to use this today. Okay, so Jerry Seinfeld joked once that most of the people attending a funeral would rather be lying in the casket than delivering the eulogy. It's not a joke in my opinion, considering that I would be one of those people. So the fear of public speaking, or glossophobia, which is the technical term for speech anxiety, is one of the most common phobias and affects more than half of the population. So for my presentation, I've looked deep into the fear of public speaking, and I've attempted to figure out why I'm afraid, why other people are afraid, and in the end, how we can overcome it. So for as long as I can remember, I've been afraid of public speaking. No matter how small the audience was, I would choose classes that I knew I wouldn't have to get up in front of an audience in, like a drama class or a business studies class that I'd have to give a sales pitch in at the end. And the only time that I felt comfortable on stage was when I had a guitar in my hands, which I'll talk about later. So, what is glossophobia? I'll start off with some facts and statistics. So, glossophobia comes from the Greek words glossa, meaning tongue, and phobos, meaning fear. So the translation is literally fear of the tongue. And the fact that there's a phrase for it in ancient Greece proves that this is a fear that's been around for a long time. So, according to a poll done by the National Institute of Mental Health, glossophobia is the most common social phobia, as I said before, and is even more common than necrophobia, which is the fear of death. So, 75% of the population is affected, 73% of the female, and 75% of the male population. So, what causes this fear? People with glossophobia usually develop the fear early on in life, and a lot of the time it can have a lot to do with being an introvert and extrovert. And for myself, it took me a lot of searching to figure out what actually made me afraid. I couldn't pinpoint a specific incident that had triggered it, but basically when I was younger, I'd always been afraid of getting up in front of the audience, and I wasn't quite sure why. But I was pretty shy, and I've always been more of an introvert. I had this very small fear of probably embarrassing myself or messing up in front of my teachers or fellow peers. And over time, I just never dealt with it, and it tumbled into this fear that I have now. So the fear can almost always be traced back to a problem that the child had when they were younger. It can come from it's usually from being shy, but it can also stem from bigger issues like mental problems, shyness, and being an introvert, which is not that big a problem. Low self-esteem, being bullied, but it's almost always from being shy. So there's a lot of symptoms of glossophobia if you are afraid when you're on stage. Probably 80% of them I'm experiencing right now, so be careful. So what's actually going on in your body when you go up in front of an audience, if you are afraid, is your body's natural flight or fight response, which happens when your body thinks it needs to prepare for a situation, a dangerous situation. It will get ready to fight or run away. So you'll get a massive rush of adrenaline, your eyes will dilate, your knees will buckle, your heart will pound, and it can make you really dizzy. And it can make it really hard to talk about what you have to talk about next, especially if you don't have cards. So the symptoms, which you can see here, they can be grouped into two primary categories. There's the physical symptoms, which include things like increased blood pressure, heartbeats, shaking, nausea, dizziness, increased sweating, stiffening of neck, upper back muscles, and dry mouth, and even possible fainting, if you have a really, really bad, you're so scared. And then the verbal symptoms are things like a tense voice, voice cracking, quivering voice, and vocal pauses. So, through all of my research, I found what I found to be the three main roots of the fear. And I found these from asking students questions, asking myself questions, reading books, the internet, etc. So, the first thing that I came up with was the fear of the unknown. So, practice can be everything. Think of a seasoned rock climber that's climbing a huge cliff compared to someone that's just starting off. Humans are wired to be afraid of what they don't know. Things are going to race through our minds like, am I going to get hurt, will I mess up, what will people think of me, etc. Throughout history, things we don't understand tend to have caused fear, and when we can't determine the outcome of a situation that pushes us, we usually become scared. It all ties into human nature. Maybe back in time, cavemen were afraid to enter dark caves because a saber-toothed tiger might be waiting inside or something. It's a fear that has evolved with us, and now, like most things, practice will make perfect. And personally, I've become a little more comfortable in front of an audience by pushing myself to do more and more small presentations, as well as musical performances, which have helped tremendously. And every time that I stand in front of an audience now, I become slightly more comfortable because I adjust my settings and I can know what to expect. And then the next point I came up with is embarrassment, which is pretty common. Everyone knows what it feels like to be horribly embarrassed, right? It's terrifying. So for a lot of people, the chance of embarrassment is enough to back away. Most people have some sort of memory when they were younger, and they're horribly embarrassed, and this feeling can linger throughout their whole lives. And when you're confronted by a situation that could turn into an embarrassing one, that's enough to back away for a lot of people. And then the last aspect, and probably the most common one, is the fear of judgment. When you're on stage, everything you have is there. You're so vulnerable. How you look, how you're walking, how you're talking, everything. And just having so many eyes on you can be so scary for many people, including myself. And personally, I still haven't done enough presentations yet, but the fear still scares me. The fear that still scares me is the fear of the unknown. So, for my project portion of my Greenstone, so my project within my project, I was trying to figure out what to do, and I thought, so what is one thing that almost everyone has in common when it comes to speeches, and that's flashcards. Except I didn't use flashcards. In the end, I said use a book. But the idea is that you make these flashcards, and these are the ones that I made. You paint them, and then you write a phrase on it, and it's supposed to be something meaningful to yourself, which is why I blurred them out, because if I had shown you what they said, it would have defeated the purpose. So you slip these into your deck of flashcards, if you're using flashcards, and you're looking through them, and then you stumble onto a card that says something like, you're doing great, or keep going, or something. It just takes your mind away for a second, and it can boost your confidence a little bit, hopefully. And I was going to use flashcards, like I said, but I decided to use the book because I found it easier. And the idea still applies, but it can be adjusted to your own needs. So I just taped them in here, and it's helping a little bit. So the next part of my project is a video that I made. So I just made a short compilation of questions about public speaking that I asked teachers, or a teacher, and students. So here it is. Yeah.
Loud. What scares me the most is the potential of forgetting what I was going to say, and possibly making a fool of myself.
I think I'm afraid of messing up.
A lot of people watching you when you talk about something,
forgetting all of my lines and not being able to give the speech.
Not knowing what to say.
That amount of focus that's being put on you.
I'm probably not the most respected person to people that are speaking in front of me. I'm kind of scared that people will be like me and make fun of me when I'm on stage.
That sense of being judged and possibly making a fool of myself.
I lose track instantly, and if I don't stay on track, I'm just gonna go off somewhere. I don't know what it is.
Fear of judgment and failure.
Small groups actually can be more scary because you can see the individual reactions of the people.
Large groups are definitely more difficult for me. Small groups I enjoy. I actually don't mind doing that. It's just as the group gets bigger and bigger, there's more and more people that are potentially they're judging you or finding your faults or noticing that you misspoke.
Both are really difficult. I don't know why large groups are pretty easy because I don't know anyone.
the bigger the group, the scarier.
It depends on the kind of people that I'm speaking to. Oh, most definitely.
I would do anything that I needed to avoid having to speak in public. If I knew there was a class where I was going to have to give a speech, if I didn't have to take that class, I would not take that class.
Last year, yes. This year, I'm trying to get over it. This year, Greenstone.
So at the beginning of the year, I never even saw myself doing my green school, and I was so terrified. I couldn't even picture it as a reality. But that's where I started getting over the fear. Just constantly knowing that there was this huge presentation waiting for me at the end of the year, it made me start getting more and more comfortable with it because my mind had to find ways to cope and convince me that this was reality and I was going to have to do it in the end. So I found the best way for myself was just to ease into it. Baby steps was the key for me. I started pushing myself to do more and more small presentations leading up to this, as well as I joined the school band, which we played a lot of live gigs this year, so it made me more comfortable getting up in front of an audience. And then I found that using media helps a lot because it directs a lot of the attention away from you, as well as it can really help you with what you need to talk about next, especially if you don't have flashcards or a book. And in the end, I'm just super thankful that I was pushed into this because I feel I've grown tremendously from it all. And it's simply a huge step in becoming a better public speaker, which I'm sure will be very beneficial to my future. And now you guys know a little bit more about what's going on to these guys that are going to be coming on after me. Wasn't that bad, so thank you.
In the moment.